based on presentations.
All right, and again, put your pencils down when you feel you are done, or you feel like you can't do any more. All right. Now, how many of you guys feel like you were able to find a descriptor for every single one of the elements, do's and no's that you wrote down? No. All right. So at this point, all right, you've pulled out what you can. All right. You've tried to make a connection between what the tasks on this assignment are going to be. All right, in the context of what we did previously and what we're doing in the future, and you try to identify at least something that describes what those should look like in terms of quality. All right, but the odds are you still have questions either about what those descriptors mean, what those actually look like, all right, or questions about how maybe what you identified in the description relate to the rubric in the first place. Maybe you didn't see it, all right, that's fine. I want you guys to turn over your sheet. On the back, you've got a 2-column chart, all right? What I want you and your group members to do is go through, and I want you to identify 3 things, 3 elements. These can be 3 questions you still have, but 3 things about which you feel you are unclear, all right, regarding the rubric, all right, regarding what some things might look like on the rubric, or it regards the connection between the elements you noticed and where they are in the rubric. 3 questions that you guys feel like you really need to have clarified and understand better, all right, before moving forward. And I'd like you to write that in the first 3 boxes on the right-hand column. For example, all right, maybe, all right, I see the word insightful and cohesive, insightful and convincing, and I'm not sure how insightful, all right, is different from convincing, or insightful is different from, all right, so what does insightful mean? What does it look like? Could be a question that you write down. It may be that you see the term textual features. You don't know what that means. Looking at your listing of rubric, right? You can't imagine what something looks like as you're writing. That would be a good place to start for questions. Yours is a lot easier to read than most.
Really? So there's sometimes with kids I'm like, I thought I could read everything, but...
I tried recently. I can figure it out if I spend time with it. You have to do you have handwritten forms, lots of experience. Faster.
If it's for me, I just write it so I can read it.
As you guys are posing your questions or identifying the thing about which you are unclear, take a minute to predict or guess what you think. All right, what do you think this might involve? All right, or also, all right, what do you think it should look like? At least what ideas do you currently have in your mind about it? Go ahead and write them down. previously when we did a NHT chart or QHT chart with vocabulary in the first unit, one of the things they had to do with the center column, they've heard of it, is at least write down what they think they know about it, so this is along the lines of what they've done. Most of these tasks are things that they would have done before in some context. Otherwise, it's just a lot, all at one time. As I can see that our conversations have started to drift off topic, I'm going to assume that we're done and move back to business. So, you've gone through and tried to break down both the instructions for the assignment and the rubric as best you can. You've identified the different pieces of it, and when you look at the descriptors, begin to make connections between what's there and what things might look like. In other words, you begin to analyze what you need to do for this assignment. All right, but the reality is you still have questions. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to take some time quickly going through groups and allow them to pose their questions to the class. And if someone in the class thinks they can add to that understanding, go ahead. All right, I will interject as I can. And for these various points, I'll get some notes up here. All right, that you guys can put in the right-hand side to clarify either what that idea is, what it looks like, or what it might involve in terms of the things that we're going to be learning during the poetry unit. All right. So, is there a group that maybe has a question they're burning to ask that wants to go first? Yes, Jeff.
I have a concern. Here's my question. What constitutes the excellent knowledge of the effect praise, mock, and warn have on theme and or character? I don't know. I can identify praise, mock, and warn, I have a feeling, but I don't know how to connect praise, mock, and warn to a character or to a theme.
Well, when we're talking about poetry, where we find characters in poetry? We usually think about that in short stories or novels, right? So there's always one place you can look for character in a poem, and that's the speaker. All right. The second place is any person that the speaker describes. All right. So in that case, all right, they might be more identities or personages as opposed to characters, but you do have the voices or descriptions of people that you can use for that. All right. But here's a good question: what is the difference between excellent and good? Anyone have an explanation for that? That's a tough. It's not something that pops into my head immediately. Well, maybe the solution is not just to look at the descriptors, but to look at the descriptors with the entirety of the explanation. All right. What we're looking at is basically an understanding of the effect of praise, mock, and warning on these different elements, character development. So keep in mind, a speaker may present themselves in one way at the beginning of a poem, but they may have taken on a very different tone or perspective as the poem goes on. So I see some development in the speaker. All right. Lots of poems like to add ironic endings, all right, which reveal something about the speaker that you were not aware of for a good portion of the time. All right. So when we look at poetry, those would be the things you might want to consider when thinking about character development. This is what I do writing on the board. All right. There's a plot. All right. Some poems tell a story, but some poems present images. All right. So you can think of plot as of an events in the story, but you can also think of it simply as the sequence of ideas or images that are presented, or how they get from the beginning to the end. All right. And theme. All right. That's how I would probably. I also would. If anyone, all right, so when we think about that, all right, can you get this idea of excellent or good understanding of how a speaker changes their perspective? Does that give you a context in which to think about what that looks like?
Well, what about if the speaker doesn't change perspective?
Well, maybe it is dependent on the poem. They may not. The speaker might not change perspective. All right, but you would still be able to understand their perspective would be what you understand about the character. Yeah. I honestly, these are some issues I have with the rubric in general too, because I do think that is the assignment like they write their own poem or short story as written in in Springboard?
In Springboard, it's a variety.
Yeah.
So they're writing the analysis, but it's on either a poem that they read already in the unit,
Mhm.
something they found, it could be even on their own writing, so they have an opportunity to.
And I think this is trying to encapsulate a really broad range of things, and if we're giving them poems, then it may be that the language there could be modified to, I hadn't thought about this, to be what those would look like in a poem. Because what I would be doing with this part, when kids aren't sure about that, is I'd be putting those things ideas, and then I'd be giving them ideas for what to look like, what to look for in a poem that would approximate those things. Right, and that, they've got a handout from when we did our multi-reads previously, it has a lot of that stuff listed too. Right, and at this point, I would simply go around, I would collect these, all right, since we're doing it on Friday, and I'd be able to generate a Google Doc for most of the concerns that people had and they recognized, so I can push that out on Monday and actually get individual responses in terms of what they feel comfortable with and what they don't. And how much time did that take? That was 35 minutes? What was it?
I can tell you.
Now, in reference to excellent and good.
No, I would love to have feedback.
But no, I think in reference to excellent and good, I think it also has to do with the selection of lines.
Yes.
And your, and your analysis, like your commentary that you add with them. There's a difference, right? So I can select appropriate line, but I may not be as thorough in the commentary that I use to explain that, and I think that
Connects it to the
changes.
second half
Yes.
of this, so we look at that in order to understand what that
Yep.
might
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna sit down now.
Thanks,
How much time was it, Jeff?
thanks,
Short of 39.
Okay. I'm giving myself about 45 minutes in class, I think, for it. I had it paced for 30, but realistically, there'll be parts that.
Cause I was gonna ask so I saw you walked around and monitored and you supported anybody that, like if they struggled, or did you have some specific look-fors as you were walking around?
Look for is kids are gonna try to copy out those sentences. So the first round look for is gonna be who is selecting words and phrases versus who is just copying things over and hoping they hit the target. All right.
Did you have do you have kind of a list of things that you wanted to see?
On that, and this is one thing that maybe I
Your
didn't
model.
see as much, and I think that could be the process, is I didn't see as much initially showing up in the center column. All right, when I moved around, I think the indication was to put a lot of stuff in the right column.
And the only reason why I asked that is
This was a quick modification of what I've done previously because of a new rubric.
just have you planned for, was there something that you wanted to ensure came out in this, in this unpacking? And potentially by having a model, you can ensure look, there are some points that I wanna make sure that we hit or that students have, because I'm assuming if there was time, at moments where you stopped us, we could potentially kind of articulate some of the things that we had on this list. And so I'm saying that to say, if we have a model, then we can ensure oh, they haven't mentioned this yet. How can I ensure that they mention or leverage whatever this idea is the next time we kind of break or debrief, to ensure that the key vocabulary is articulated, to make sure the key concepts are articulated.
Obviously, I wanted them to look at the main descriptors of that knowledge, how you show the knowledge. We show the knowledge by what you choose and how relevant it is to whatever you're doing. I drew your attention to the textual features because that's really generalized and vague, and I don't see people doing that. That's immediately what I'm going to do. I actually think that that's something I do need to give them fairly elaborate notes on the back. I think someone will answer that. So we see textual features, what do we mean for that with the poem? That way we can map it to what we're actually doing over the course of the next 5 lessons.
The key for especially this front page, I would want them to realize hey, you know a lot of this stuff already.
Yeah.
And so the back is almost this is me trying to find out what are they still struggling with. So I feel in my mind, I wouldn't have a model on the back side, especially because it's every kid's gonna give you something different there.
Yeah.
But I would wanna, the thing I would check like my lab and be like, I wanna make sure they have like the 10 things I know we hit
Yes.
YouTube, that needs to be here.
Yes.
I guess that would be the answer to that question.
Yes.
Like, that's what I would wanna know, like, you understand, you know all these things already.
Just sometimes like when we unpack a lesson, like doing it ourselves to say like, I wanna see when I'm walking around, do they have these key points? Because when I looked at that first page, some things that I noticed, like based on the rubric, there was some, language that is normally, aligned to argumentation, like claim and, a line of reasoning, right, and persuasive interpretation. So that might be something that I would be walking around for. Are they making that connection that this is not just, this is almost the culmination of all of the units, that you are still using persuasive techniques in your analysis, right? You are still, you are still creating a claim with your thesis and making that connection all the way through and seeing if they're picking up with it as I'm walking around and so forth. So sometimes it's just.
And I think it
helpful to
might be
have-
worth going around and actually having them share, making a list of those common things before moving on to the descriptors, just to make sure that we have recognized those. But at the same time, as Mike said, I wanted them to just kind of see what they could figure out and then generate questions so that the thing, if they're looking at the rubric and they don't know what they're supposed to do, I want to know it now. So we can clarify kind of what that means, but also what they need to do over the next couple of weeks to get there.
It is funny to study the different grade levels, and even English too. If you just looked at the type of essay that they're writing, it's thesis, claim, thesis, claim. Claim does not appear in a lot of the, like the RL analysis writing. But it's also interesting that claim is the word that's used in the very last English 4 assignment. Like the culminating assignment for all of these levels vertically, they use the word claim. That's pretty interesting. That's just interesting that they do that. I don't see it as much different.
I think that is your interpretation. I think that is the MYP. Cause I don't see it in the Springboard.
What, the word claim?
Yes.
We had initially not put that word in there.
Yeah, so I don't see it just at glance.
Yeah. And like,
It's not there, but
it's okay.
I appreciate I appreciate the use of it because then it shows them like, this
It's
language
like
is not
The
indicative.
language we've been
of one
using
thing.
for CR,
Yep.
like short writing all year, has
Yes.
been using claims evidence
Yep,
services.
yep.
It is also, it is
And-
NYP.
Yeah,
And
but
it's also
I like it.
representative of standards and how it would be graded probably too.
Cause then it's like, it's transcending ideas, so that they don't think that, oh, I only use it here, it's throughout. Everything is a claim, it just might be a different name,
Yeah, or everything's an argument. So
or
we can
everything's
use-
an
We
argument.
can use claim.
Yes,
We use thesis.
yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean.
Sean,
I would love questions
Yeah, how
about
do
this,
you-
about either ways to make it
Sorry.
more efficient,
How do you
ways
think?
to streamline it. I mean, it was in the past, I had 2 rubrics to compare. And so, with the 2 rubrics, this was real quick. Alright, and since it was real quick, there was some, like clarity that needed in terms of what the textual stuff was. But we were to do that quickly, and then groups were able to identify, okay, what 3 things do we know really well? What 2 things are we unsure about? What 3 things are we clueless about? Stick them on sticky notes, put them up on the stop sign. Alright, and then we can go through them and talk about it as a class, and it took less time.
So
With the other rubric, I tried this to see, but I'm always concerned it gets a little busy because I have a tendency towards that in the first place.
So I would say, this is, you're asking for feedback. My wonder would be, that I think the purpose of the QHT is just to determine how students feel or how comfortable they feel about the skills and the knowledge required for the assignment. And I don't know if I would spend time comparing these two, like what happened then versus now, because I think the QHT captures those same wonders from the student perspective. So if you wanted to, you just took the rubric that, the drafted rubric, let's say it's final, and then the new sheet that we use, and just use those 2 without the comparison. That's probably what I would do. I wouldn't want them, I was the guy who did the first literary analysis. And so I spent time studying the first literary analysis, but really what I'm doing is just, I need to focus my attention on unit 4, and so I pour all my time into that. So I probably would just go right here.
I would hope the connection to the unit 2 happens naturally.
You would hope.
Yeah, I would hope it's like, you had kids be like, oh, like, we organize ideas like 500 times already, like, we know, like, I would hope, cause like in a group QHC, especially if they have to talk about it, I feel like that would happen organically, like, your
Yeah.
draft a thesis, we know how to text board, we know how to outline.
Yep.
That's the hope.
And I rooted my time away from the actual unit 4, and I put my time into the unit 2. And so I would want, I think my perspective would be that all students are focusing on unit 4, and then maybe that natural transition comes back in.
Yeah, who is in those pairs will be deliberate too, in terms of who's having to deal with the new learning.
Yeah, I just like from an equity standpoint, I think everybody should just go straight in on unit 4. And I agree that naturally those things will come up. And also, I think maybe in the academic monitoring part, Mike had said maybe here are the 10 things, and he wrote those 10 things down, so he knows that that's there. That's captured in Jennifer's comment too. She's got those things, she wants those things to appear, and she knows those things are important. And that, you could eliminate this and just kind of say, I hope these come in, but hey, one little part in there might just be like, hey, these 10 things were actually in unit 2, just want you to know.
So I would be inclined to divide it based on that into 2 columns. Things that you have seen before in previous assignments versus things you've done away, that we are still connecting it to existing knowledge and making sure that when the conversation happens, that there is some ability for groups to spontaneously clarify that, because it takes pressure off the group time as well.
I think it's powerful to have them look at the rubric and be able to form their own questions. So I really did appreciate that.
I did too.
To step it up, just, again, it's me and the scripting thing. Maybe script a couple of your own questions, just in case they don't come up, right? Because, just like you said, like, I know you probably have, so versus doing that on the front end, you could give them this one question to model the type of question, and or just have that on the back end, see what they say first, and then present your question.
I would probably choose to do the textual elements or the part in the second part, because it's the part that leads into all the things they need to recognize they need to learn, so they can actually do the analysis.
I do it in the back end, because he already said that he's gonna collect all this information.
Yeah.
And then he could just plant the question and just be like, the question that really was impactful for me is the one I secretly wrote, and I'm saying that Amanda wrote, like, I would wanna do that on the Monday.
Yep.
That'd be great.
But I do like to have them, like, just take time to see, like, what don't I get? What don't I understand? I need to get clarity on what does this mean? What is the difference between good and excellent? Cause I wanna be excellent.
I had a question, like, I did this quickly, as yesterday, as kind of a way of modifying what I had done previously. I think I had like groups do 3 questions. I feel like that's just, would it be better to have every individual write down 2 first? Or do you think that needs to be done with pairs versus groups? How do we differentiate that to make sure everyone's answering an honest question and not just throwing down something that some other person in the group did and not thinking through it?
100%.
That's that, every kid, every time.
I'm 100%
Yeah.
part, every time.
Yeah.
I want the kid to do some of the thinking and the work. That's actually what I feel like you tasked us with doing, and then we just didn't get it we didn't get a chance to talk about it, which was fine.
But if I'm hearing this correctly, do you wanna have them independently try to create a question?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should all have to put, what is the one thing here about which you're really not sure what it's asking, what
So
it's
you
saying?
could charge them with 2,
Yeah,
right? Charge them with 2 questions, but know you only might get 1. And then as you walk around, monitor, and then when you think that everybody's at least got 1, because you're gonna have variation. Some kids will be able to get a question really quickly,
and I can
and
have
other
them
kids
see if
won't,
they,
and then they can kind of.
after the one, they can see if they can answer them in the groups.
Yeah.
And if the groups are unsure, then the groups can post that to the
Yeah.
class and we can have a discussion.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
what we've done is in the small groups, they will come up, first, you're together, but come up with your own, and then you're gonna share it with everybody else, and then you can come up with a group one, as you collaborate and kind of discuss. Because somebody's question might spark you to think, oh, I didn't think about that, what about this? So kind of getting those ideas.
And I still want them to take notes on the ones we do as a class, because just because their group thinks they answered it, doesn't mean they answered it as well as they could, and another group may bring that up.
I don't think we have enough time to unpack. Sorry.
It's all good.
Nope.
It's also we had that schedule.
We put up, here.
like in your inclusion class?
So we would, well, first walk would be fine, I think that we would have to kind of prompt them and give them a guided, this is kind of what we're looking for, what type of question we're looking for, because then they'll just look at us like, what are you talking about? So kind of going through that, kind of reminded them of how we unpack some of the things that we talked about before, and kind of giving those hints and reminders of that, and then giving them time to kind of come up with their own, then putting them in their groups, they need to then share out yours, and then kind of get some ideas bounced from that, from what we've said, and then from their peers, and then, kind of the same with, I'm sure second block would be about the same, and fourth block would be the same, it's just kind of keeping them on track of, okay, let's focus on this, and we might have to tell certain ones in that group, you're gonna focus on just the rubric part, look at the vocabulary, and these might be looking more at the, content, kind of the concepts.
Would you do both? So he, Sean did that, planning page?
Yeah,
Would you do the planning page? Or would you maybe take the, like this part right here? Just thinking for you, like if they took this and then also the rubric, because that's the meat of it. The planning, there were things like when Joel and I were talking, just a lot of that was like how I'm going to like process through the piece versus what are the actual skills that are in the rubric.
typically, if we have something like that, we'll take a whole group, and they're gonna focus on that first part,
Got
and another group will focus on the other, and then we'll
And
share
then
it out,
join.
yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
That's the way
Right, we're gonna shift the deep dive to 4.2 on Monday. We still have time for it.
Yeah, just the easy framing of 4.2 is just making sure that we have these, this is kind of what the goals were. So if you prepared that lesson and you kind of know where these points are, I wouldn't say that that's the script to an organic discussion, but that's the reason why we decided we were gonna go unpack 4.2. All right, so I'll just make sure that you have that.
Alright, that's it. Pretty great.
Great, how are you? Nice.
This idea works better when they already had a rubric that had been highlighted as circled from the previous unpacking, and you just quickly look at it,
Yeah,
What do you think, Joel?
right?
Do you have a question? Or you need to go?
Oh, no, I
But-
need help